Hi, we're back with Congresswoman Dina Titus. Now, Steve Sisolak and I were just talking about Interstate 15.
Right.
You drive it, I drive it. It's never easy.
True.
Never
It can be a parking lot.
Yeah, but it seems like they're always doing some construction, trying to widening the number of lanes. Or is that going to one day? Do you think they're going to have all these 3-4 lanes straight through to LA?
Well, that would be nice. I'm on the Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, and it always comes down to money. This time we continued the highway bill by just patching it. We didn't come up with any sustainable source of revenue, whether it was gas tax or miles traveled or whatever. We just stole from other pots of money to just kind of crip along. A lot of people think we should have made a bigger investment in infrastructure back when we passed the stimulus bill. And I agree with that, because roads are falling apart, bridges aren't safe. We got a rating, I think, of a D from the American Association of Engineers. We need to make that investment. Right now, though, most of the emphasis is not on I-15, it's on building I-11, which goes from Las Vegas to Phoenix, because those are the only two major cities in the country not connected by an interstate at all.
Wow. So you know how some cities have the quick pass and they charge to pay for the roads that way? Is that even an option?
Well, the state legislature has considered toll roads many times, even back when I was there, and they've never passed it. But they could do that, I think, as they widened the road right here through town with all the stuff, the neon corridor that's going on in downtown Las Vegas. They've looked at tolls, but people hate tolls. They hate to pay tolls. They think that these are our highways. We shouldn't have to pay double for them.
Oh, I totally get that, but you also hate to spend 2-3 hours extra in traffic, and this is our lifeline.
They've tried a little something with the special lanes, the express lanes, and some places, of course, have the carpool lanes. If you have more than 2 people in a car, you can go in those. We need to look at all those options.
Yeah. You're running for election this year, Congresswoman. You have to run every 2 years, so essentially you're running in every election.
That's right.
And you've been through a few of them. Why is this one so quirky?
Well, Ed, I was thinking that if I were still in the classroom, I taught political science all those years, I don't know what I would tell my students, because what's going on this time does not fit any of the theories that we ever talked about. Also, I always prided myself in being not partisan in the classroom, and if I were there now, it would be very hard for me not to make comments about the other party's candidate at the national level.
Yeah, sometimes I sense that when you're like when I'm watching CNN, for instance, which of the 3 news networks I consider the most neutral or independent.
That's right.
But sometimes you can look at the at the host, and you can tell that, hey, they have an opinion about this issue.
Well, Anderson Cooper, I heard speak when he came for the foundation dinner here, and you look at his life experiences and you think he surely could not be supportive of what Donald Trump is doing, but he tries to keep it cool on the show, so I give him that credit.
But what are you hearing on the campaign trail from your constituents? I mean, obviously people are frustrated.
That's right.
Of inaction. And you're talking about the infrastructure and getting money. Now, if you ask Republicans, they'll say, hey, we need infrastructure money. You ask Democrats, they'll say the same thing.
Right.
But it doesn't happen.
Well, I know. It's not about good policy. It's about bad politics. You remember that the Republicans, when President Obama was first elected, stated, McConnell said, our goal is to keep him from getting anything accomplished. Now, when we go back for the fall, for the end of this term, there's very little time left to be in Washington to get anything passed. We left for the summer without Zika funding, without dealing with the Flint water crisis, nothing on gun safety, nothing on voter rights, nothing on immigration. I don't blame the public for being frustrated. I'm frustrated myself.
So is this the leadership in the House just not bringing these things up for a vote?
That's exactly right. They won't bring them to the floor. I think if you brought some of those to the floor, there are reasonable people on the other side of the aisle who would vote for them. Republicans in the South should vote for Zika funding, because those are the states where the most mosquitoes are, certainly Florida, and now Louisiana, where you've got all that flooding. You'd think they'd vote for it if it came to the floor.
And how does the Nevada delegation function in Washington? It's kind of mixed, and you have some, some new Congress people. How does it work over the last session?
We're pretty compatible. I get along with Mark Amadei very well. I served with him in the legislature. Joe Heck the same way. Dean Heller the same way. Of course, the big honcho is Harry Reid. I didn't know Crescent Hardy in Carson, but the delegation usually sticks together, at least superficially, on most issues.
Yeah. You mentioned Harry Reid because, Senator Reid has been instrumental in keeping nuclear waste from coming to southern Nevada. And now, all of a sudden, he's leaving, and there's rumblings, and this is, look, this battle's been going on for, 30 years already.
A long time.
So we've kept it away from our communities for 30 years. But, what do you see happening now politically? How do we keep nuclear waste without Harry Reid from coming into southern Nevada?
Well, you can count on them trying to ram and jam it here. Shimkus in the House is from Illinois, where a lot of those plants are. He wants to get it out of his backyard and send it to Yucca Mountain. And he's gaining some support in the House. I worry about our own delegation staying solid against it because they're starting to see dollar signs. Now, Hillary Clinton has said she wouldn't do it, just like Obama said that, President Obama. I don't know where Trump stands on it. I don't know that he's even addressed it. But the main thing that will work in our favor in this case is the lack of money. There's just not enough money to finish it, and I don't think they're going to appropriate money to do that. And these false promises that, oh, well, we'll give Nevada something extra, a little lagniappe for taking it, that is certainly not going to happen.
Give us a gas mask.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But but the science is still the same.
Exactly.
We have fault lines, earthquake lines,
water
running
table.
through it, water table,
Transportation.
getting it on whether rail or trucks on our highways and through our communities.
Right.
It's all those problems continue to exist.
And that's the argument that I use the most in the House with my colleagues is this is not just about Nevada's backyard. This is going to come through your backyard because if you ship it from where the power plants are, it will go through almost everybody's district, and it'll be near churches and schools and downtown and residents, and so they need to think about that because that's where the accident's most likely to happen, not once it's buried in a hole somewhere.
I know that you were just recently helpful in freeing up some money from homeless veterans.
Oh, yes.
Right.
I'm on the Veterans Committee, and I sought that assignment because we have a large number of veterans here in southern Nevada, and that number is growing. As wars wind down, hopefully, and the economy comes back, I think more veterans will come here, and this is still a big retirement area. So one of the problems with veterans is homelessness, and we have cut that by 50%, but still that's not enough because if you're a veteran, you deserve a roof over your head if you wore the uniform. And so this is to help some of the temporary housing units like U.S. Vets and Veterans Village who provide some temporary housing to help you get back on your feet so you won't be homeless. But homelessness ties to a lot of things. It ties to PTSD, opioid use, suicide, a lack of a job. All of those things are just so interwoven that we need to address the big picture.
You drive even coming to the station, and you can see the homeless
right.
are all camping out down here on Four Master Lane. And a large percentage of them are vets.
That's right. Veterans, they come out of service and they don't have the assistance that they need to transfer into civilian life, whether it's going back to school. And these programs are available. Sometimes they just don't know how to get them. The GI Bill has been extended. There are housing benefits. The health care is there. We have this brand new hospital that's a wonderful addition. But we've got to find them, reach out to them. And a lot of it's tied to mental illness, and it starts with PTSD, starts with opioid use. That's one of the reasons that I've been a supporter of, in the states where there's medical marijuana, let's look at that as an alternative to just give them a pill and tell them to go to sleep and shut up.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of them are very much advocating that as well, a lot of our veterans. And you talked about, we were talking earlier about the inaction of Congress, and you mentioned gun issues, for instance.
Right.
We have a ballot question in Nevada, question 1, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of parallels what we're trying to do federally
exactly.
in closing the loophole for gun shows and as far as doing background checks. But if, even if Nevada, and I guess it's favored significantly to pass
I think
in
it
Nevada.
will. I support it.
And if Nevada passes it, I mean, it doesn't really take a
Absolutely.
federal act
Yes.
to really make a difference.
Oh, I think it does. I think it'll be great for Nevada to do it here, but there are state lines and what goes on the rest
You
of
could
the
drive over to
country.
Utah and just buy a gun.
Well, that's
or at a gun
right.
show, right?
All right, so that's why we need federal legislation. There are two bills that I'm a co-sponsor of. One is the one you just mentioned, which is very similar to the state question one. And the other one is if you're on the terrorist watch list, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. If you can't fly, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. I mean, that just makes common sense. That's not taking away anybody's Second Amendment rights.
Right.
So,
that might-
but neither one of those has been brought to the floor.
Although, the public is really strong in favor of both those bills.
That's right.
When you ask, people in Washington, why is it not passing? It all seems like it's the NRA, and there's a group of Republicans that are afraid to buck the NRA on
That's
this
right.
issue.
They're very powerful, and they control enough of the Republicans to keep them from bringing it to the floor, especially right before the election. As we get closer to the election, anything that's very controversial will just be stalled.
Nevada has really become a centerpiece in national elections. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're a swing state,
That's right.
and our electoral votes are important. But we also have, a very competitive Senate race,
That's right.
and not your congressional race, but another congressional race that's very competitive.
Well, that's right. Nevada has traditionally been a swing state. They say we're purple, not red or blue. Also, we have low turnout in Nevada, so that's a factor. We have a large growing ethnic population, Hispanic and Asian, and people are ticket splitters. So all of that combined makes us a very interesting place to watch.
Yeah. And now it seems like there's a lot of conversation about the election process.
Yeah.
As far as the credibility of hacking into the computers and whatnot is, and in Nevada it seems like we really haven't had much problem with that at all, and we've had some very close elections where Harry Reid won by 400 and some votes, and then we had to go back and count each one by hand. So how do you see? I mean, you have, and a lot of people, and I'm one of them, quite honestly, that I'd like to see a process that's easier to vote,
Right,
where it
that's
can
right.
just be at home and vote online or something. But it seems that's going to be less likely with all the hacking that's
right.
going on.
It's amazing what people can do with computers nowadays. That's nothing that I can understand. But in Nevada, we have not passed any voter suppression laws, which I am proud to say. They tried a couple of them, but they failed in the legislature, because there's been no real history of voter fraud. You just can't point to it and say this is a problem that we need to address. And most of those laws really aren't aimed at fraud. They're aimed at keeping certain people from the
voting.
polls. And so I'm with you. I think we need to open it up, not close it down, because if you do, then fewer and fewer people will be able to participate, and it will become less and less democratic.
Yeah. What do you see President Obama doing next year?
Well, that's a good question. They say that he's going to lecture and write, and he's kind of an academic scholar. But he's been keeping it kind of close to the vest. I think another question is, what will our First Lady, Michelle Obama, do? Because she's certainly not going to go back into the shadows either.
Well, maybe senator in New York.
Well, a lot of possibilities.
Well, how about Harry Reid? What do you hear about Harry Reid?
Well, I think Senator Reid is going to keep his house in Washington, and then he'll come home here. He said he wished he could be in the Senate till the day he died, and I know he hates to leave it because it has been his whole life for such a long time.
Right.
But I'm sure he's not going to go away from Nevada politics.
Yeah, that's going to be a big change for us.
Oh, people don't realize just what a difference it makes having him in the position that he's been in. He can do more things behind the scenes than we can imagine.
Yeah, it's important to have that kind of prominence and power. We had it with Paul Axelt on the Republican side, and then Harry Reid on the Democratic side, and now we have our senators are going to be new, essentially.
That's
right?
Well, it'll all be pretty new, and I'll be the ranking Democrat for the state of Nevada. So I look forward to that role, but it's going to be, you'll never fill Harry Reid's shoes. We'll never in a generation be back in that position.
Yeah. What does it take for the Democrats to get back in control of the House?
Well, we have to win 30 seats, so that's a pretty big hill to climb. I think the Senate will go Democratic, and I think we will gain some seats too. And that's great. The only thing is that the seats we gain are in the swing districts where the more moderate Republicans tend to be, so we'll gain seats and they'll become further to the right. So it'll be an interesting dynamic next cycle.
So you expect a lot of this, continuing polarization?
I think there will, yes, unfortunately. You know, when I was in the state legislature, there were 21 members, and Senator Raggio and I disagreed on some things, but we worked together. It was more about North versus South than it was Democrat versus Republican. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is in Congress.
And I don't see that stopping. It doesn't matter whether Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump wins.
I think that's right.
It's still going to create that tension.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it happened with Obama when he was elected, you know, and it seems to me this all got nasty sometime around with the Al Gore George Bush election, and then went to the Supreme Court, and everybody kind of drew lines.
And now we only have an 8-member Supreme Court, and so that's another problem that needs to be resolved.
Right. So it makes your job a little bit harder.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather be in the fight than on the sidelines. So.
Well, and you do well as a
thank you
heck
very
of a
much.
boxer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Dina Titus.
It was a pleasure.
And we'll see you next week.
If you've been hurt in an accident, turn to someone you can trust. Enough said. Call Ed.
I'm Ed Bernstein, and I've been helping you and your neighbors for almost 40 years.